Hello, I'm Josie Mills, and I'm the Director Curator of the University of Lethbridge Art Gallery, and I am here on Blackfoot traditional territory, Treaty 7 in southern Alberta, and it's my pleasure to have a conversation with the amazing Winnipeg artist, Sarah Fuller. So hello, Sarah.
Hi, Josie. Nice to see you. Yeah, I'm Sarah Fuller. I'm based in Treaty 1 territory, Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I'm looking forward to our chat today.
So where are you actually? Are you in your studio?
I am at my studio. I have a studio in the Art Space building in downtown Winnipeg in the Exchange.
Oh, very nice.
I share, so I have another artist, Kristen Nelson, who's behind me. Well, she's not right now, but her work is. So
she might make a cameo, wander by, doesn't realize it's recording. Okay. Yeah. And then I'm going to, give full disclosure of the fact that I'm a huge fan of Sarah Fuller's work. We worked together on a couple exhibitions and a research project. So this is not going to be hard-hitting investigative journalism, just in case that's what people tuned in for. So no.
Yay.
So yeah. Okay, so we're here to talk about, and my large dog doesn't like it when I'm on Zoom. She just came and nudged me. Anyway, okay, so we're going to talk about specifically about the Birds and Books project, which I know quite a bit about because you made it in Alberta. And so do you want to just tell me a little bit, or tell the listeners a little bit about Birds and Books?
Sure. So the Birds and Books project was made in response to the Coutts Homestead in southern Alberta, and that was a project I made in after being invited there by you from the University of Lethbridge Art Gallery, I think in 2016. So it began with visiting the site, and I think it was you, Diane, and I who all went out there together the first time.
Yeah,
and
Diane Boss, sorry.
Diane Boss, yeah. So we were working with you on another project, and we went out there. And there was just this really nice sense of calm and like quiet at that house. And we learned through you that Jim Coutts, who owned the house, the property prior, was really interested in the birds on his property and took like a very detailed kind of log of all the things that he saw throughout the year. And I just thought, wow, that's really neat and beautiful. And he had a logbook, which Diane and I both thought was really cool. With a list of all the birds that he'd seen on his property. And then, so that was kind of percolating this idea of like this relationship to place. And then also learning that he was really quite engaged with the history of the land there and current affairs, and had this amazing book collection also at the house. It seems like there was some great material to make a project about that relationship to place based on that house and the collections there. So yeah.
And I'll give a little bit of context on the Coutts Center. So it's located near Nanton, Alberta, which is about halfway between Lethbridge and Calgary. And Jim Coutts bought back his grandfather's homestead, and then started already like doing things like systematically planting small patches of original prairie grasses and recording them. And then he left it to the University of Lethbridge along with his substantial art collection. It's now a public botanical gardens, but focused on native plants. So not kind of showy and forced kind of, flowers and things. So it's a site that people can visit in the summertime. And then the University of Lethbridge Art Gallery, we do a number of art projects there. So you were one of the first artists, just as the farm was transitioning, and it is also a working farm, was transitioning to being a public space. So when part of one of the ways we've worked together is around research projects, and we're both interested in art as research. And while you were doing your master's, we started getting into some more conversations around that. So one of the things that you participated in, and it partly was at the Coutts Center, was that when I was getting going on having a number of artists work around environmental issues, I had SSHRC funding and brought a bunch of artists and scholars together for the You Are Here series, which was invited diversity of people to imagine different futures for our environment. So the birds and books connected with that as well. But part of what I wanted to talk to you about is also just art as research. So you introduced me to Tim Ingold, and I can never remember the quote exactly, but I really like the idea that he talks about that artists think through making. So can you tell people a little bit about Tim Ingold and how that relates to your work?
Sure. I have to give props to my cousin Jen Hamilton, who's also an artist, and she's the one who told me about that book. And it was during my master's that I started reading it, and I just went, yes. Like, I think at that particular time, because there's such a focus in your master's or in many master's programs to write and to, like, you know, be thinking about things in a very, like, language text written way. And I feel as an artist personally that I learn a lot through actually engaging with physical materials. Even if it's a digital collage in a computer, it's still having this, like, interplay between, you know, moving something and then that has an effect on something else. So that idea of learning through making, and that everything has maybe a language or a quality that you can collaborate with, really, I thought was really excellent and really resonated with me as an artist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think the thing is, when you talk about art as research, part of it, as soon as you say the word research, people think, you know, lab coats, Bunsen burners, you know, maybe doing some tests on like cells and mice or something like that. And then maybe you'll stretch it to like what historians do, where you spend time in an archive. And people can think about artists doing that, which artists do spend time in archives and things like that. But can you talk a little bit about the kind of process, like say, how did you select these birds? Or, you know, how did you select the combination of the imagery and the materials that you use?
Okay, that's a very good question. So, well, the birds, like, I was looking particularly at that log, so it was very much directly related to the birds that were seen on that landscape. So that was like the starting point. And then around the same time, I think actually I had received a book of the birds of North America from my uncle's house in Toronto. So I had that book, so I was using that as a reference. And then I had a collection of old magazines and things, and I was really thinking about trying to use imagery that would relate to that time frame of Jim's life. So, you know, it's 20th century imagery, but also, like, in a larger kind of environmental sense, I'm also thinking about how our actions in the world are influencing ecosystems and birds, and like how human action and development is actually like integrating into the bodies of other beings. I mean, I think more of a direct relationship or correlation would be maybe folks have seen images of like seabirds, for example, that are eating plastic because they think it's shiny, or, you know, collecting things. So this sort of like this line, this imaginary line that's never been there, but maybe seen as like human in nature. I'm interested in like really pointing to the fact that we are so interconnected, and everything that we do is going to have an influence on the ecosystem that we're in and those other beings that we share the world with, basically. Yeah.
So, and
So
then
using industrial imagery in the birds is really like a lot about that as well. Yeah.
So you're just so hard to talk to because, you know, no, you're like so articulate and awesome. But okay, so then one of the other theorists that I use a lot, and I learned from my research partners, so I've been doing a lot of research around how people engage with art and the idea of art as a social activity. So I've been working with cognitive scientists who usually study monkeys. You met some of them, so Louise Barrett and Miranda Lucas. And a big influence has been the work of Alvin Noe, who's a philosopher and cognitive scientist, but he looks at art, and he has a fabulous book called Strange Tools. And what you've already been discussing, but I'm going to ask you to expand on it a little bit more, is that from Noe, what I really like is that he talks about how art shows us who we are, but shows us how we're situated how we're organized in our society and how we're situated. And my favorite quote from him is that art is like map making, and we don't make maps for the heck of it. We make maps because without them we get lost. And so you've read Alvin Noe as well. Do you have anything you want to like add to what you've taken from Noe, or how that relates to your work?
Oh yeah, I mean that book was one of those books I wrote down. Like I was like, ooh, and now I'm gonna write down this quote and this quote, and then so I basically rewrote the whole book in my notes to refer back to later. Like, oh my goodness, okay, just choose something. But I think one of the concepts he talks about in that book that I thought was so super fascinating is about how technology is a way to organize ourselves. So like, you know, something like a cup is created, and then that completely transforms the way we relate to the world and how we interact with it. And this sort of like, you know, effect can be transformational in just in the way that we relate. And so talking about art in that way, I thought was so fascinating and interesting because I think, you know, depending on your worldview, sometimes, like, I mean, we're in the arts, so we feel the value of it, you know, intrinsically, but, you know, for perhaps not everyone feels that way, but just this idea that an art object can shift your worldview or your perception of the world or reorganize the way we're looking at the world, I think is so important and like really powerful. Anyway, yeah, I mean, that book, it was just such a perfect time when I saw that book, when you shared that with me and at that You Are Here conference, because I was also working on that other project called Illuminations Human Nature, and I was like, this is ridiculous. The book's called Strange Tools, Art and Human Nature, or, you know, so yeah, it was just this synchronicity, I guess, but just this idea that it's a tool, it's something that we use to understand the world, I think kind of gives it this I don't want to say practicality, but really, you know, it has utility, and it has utility in the way that we think of ourselves and how we move through the world, and I think that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think of it as having relevance, right? So, I mean, one of the things when you're, you know, in North America in particular is that, you know, the arts are frivolous, that they're extras and they're add-ons, that they're not, you know, seen as essential. And then you spend time in other cultures and art is essential. I'm doing lots of work with Blackfoot artists and elders and knowledge keepers, and I mean, art is part of life, and it's how you communicate and it's how you engage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that there that one has that feeling when you work in the arts, but people who don't necessarily have that engagement or they just haven't really had that experience. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think one of the things like that the birds and books does, and other of your art projects is that when we are thinking about ideas like thinking about our environment and our effect on, you know, animals and birds, there's a tendency to try to think about it literally. So like you said, like people can understand it when you say, you know, plastics, you know, or an even more obvious example, you don't cut the six-pack holder that holds the cans together and then it ends up around the neck of an animal and it strangles them.
Yeah.
So you could sort of see that literal kind of step. But the thing, and this coming back to Noe, is the idea that art works with one's imagination. So it encourages one to like feel, and it opens up new ways of thinking about ideas. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
the part that I find exciting because we're
Mm-hmm.
obviously our conversation is stuck because we're barreling with worse and worse climate change, and we have people in positions of power who are climate change deniers. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how does one try to address that, I guess? So anyway, that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a question. It was more like I was at an academic conference and I was just making a comment. That was my question. And it's like, oops,
Yeah.
supposed to be moderating you. So do you have something you want to expand on from that, or should I actually ask you a genuine question?
Uh, well, there's a lot there. I do really think though that this, for me, I feel like empathy is a big part of what I try and get at with making work and like creating empathy, not just for other humans, but for other beings. And like, you know, the other project I worked on with you with the Refugio, which was about insects. I mean, trying to create an understanding or like an entry point into viewing the world from another perspective that's not dominated by human demands or needs or wants, but like really thinking about how we can be coexisting in more of a, you know, relational way that's respectful and care, you know. So this idea empathy, I think, is maybe one way to do that. And I think art can be used in that way really
Yeah,
powerfully.
and
Yeah.
I mean, people will relate to sort of dramatic and gorgeous animals, but insects, not so much.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk a little bit about Refugio?
I could. I mean, people may not know what that looks like, but perhaps we could put a link online. That was the project that I completed in 2018 with the University of Lethbridge Art Gallery, but really started in its, seed stage when I worked at Banff and was in the mountains there, and learned about this insect that had lived on a tropical island off the coast of Australia, but had been, they thought, been made extinct by basically the introduction of rats to that island. And following this meandering path of that narrative and realizing it actually has lived this entire time on another island. And like, what does that mean to think about our impact on a small place or even a broad place like, a continent, and thinking more particularly about how to take care of those small things. And in that particular project, part of my strategy was to actually think about, the nocturnal nature of that insect. So creating images that were blue, so that draws on a human understanding of what it looks like to see the world at night, but as a way to cue in, the fact that this animal is a nocturnal animal and like, what does their world look like to them? So, speaking about this story that is really about, shrinking habitats, or completely, dissolved habitats, and like, how can we create empathy for those things that only can live in those places, I guess, was a really, important part of that project.
Yeah, and so that was the Lord Howe stick insect, right?
Yes, yeah.
And
then there's also the ice crawler, or the rock crawler ice bug in the Rockies, which similarly lives in a pretty cold environment, and as things warm up, it has less and less places to go.
So, and I think this is like the perfect description of art as research. So that it's, and one of it is the idea of following curiosity. So, and this comes back to the things that I've been learning from the cognitive scientists who also study monkeys, but, we're also primates, and we're incredibly curious animals. And I think part of the thing where people don't have good experiences with artworks, contemporary artworks and galleries, is where it, they don't have a way in, so they don't feel invited in. They don't have the connection. They don't have the pre-existing knowledge. But also, like, if you have to read like a text panel to understand it, of course, I'm a museum nerd. I'll read the text panels. But so whereas when the work actually like encourages, like piques and invites curiosity, that's when people really feel like entered in. And I know that's when I've had amazing experiences, is where I'm like wanting to get in there and wanting to find out and wanting to explore and put the ideas together, and they're laid out in a way that one can do that. So but it also describes what you as an artist. So like, you became interested in this insect and just followed along and went to Australia and made all these connections.
Yes.
But it does give one new insights, because you've been told stories before about colonialism. You bring in rats and pigs and things, and that's how the dodo bird went extinct, or etc. But you don't have the empathy, and you don't have the connection. You don't have the new kind of ideas to it. Yeah. Okay. So remembering my role, so we don't just have a, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to ask you now about like what we're doing right now. So obviously the pandemic is awful, but there has been some of the kind of bright side has been, you're in Winnipeg, I'm in Lethbridge, and we wouldn't, in the before times, we didn't make connections like this from different arts organizations. So I'm really happy that I was invited to do this. I get to talk to you and a couple of other Manitoba artists. But so what have been some good experiences for you in terms of like online cultural events or art making or things like that?
Yeah, I think maybe what you just described is like, there is this, proliferation of online artist talks. So you can go to a talk that you maybe would have only been in Toronto and you would have had to fly to go see, or wherever, or Lethbridge, or and now we can tune in online, which is actually pretty cool. I've seen quite a few artist talks that way, and also have participated in conversations like the Digital Originals Live with Leaf Rapids, and that would not have happened unless unless the pandemic happened. So yeah, these interesting connections that maybe were unexpected and probably wouldn't have happened any other way, let's face it, so that's something that's neat. Like even just last weekend, there was a really fun pinhole photography panel out of Calgary with folks from, I mean, there was folks from Calgary, like Diane Boss, but then there was Nicole Small from Montreal, and like, you know, several other folks, and all over the world people tuned in to see this total, the best, in the best possible sense, pinhole nerd out panel discussion, which I was really into, but it was like totally, you know, something that would have maybe not happened before, and the audience was much bigger. So, I mean, there is the Zoom fatigue and being tired of being on the internet, but then there's also this really cool option to see things that, actually, there's another one that I saw that was really great. It was through the Mackenzie. It was for Divya. I'm pointing this way because Divya Mera is one of my studio mates as well. She's not here today, but her studio's over there. But there was a live broadcast of Asian Brain Trust, like watching Indiana Jones and giving their commentary, and it was hilarious and amazing, and like a live performance that probably never would have happened. So yeah, there's these really cool art events and artists using the internet in these really creative ways that I think is awesome. So
Yeah.
that is a definite silver lining for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed the digital exchange. I didn't know Leaf Rapids music. So, I mean, that's one of my favorite things of the cultural events. I've been telling people about it. And then we actually hired Leaf Rapids to do the sound for exhibition tour video we're doing for Alana Bartal. So that should be coming out at some point. Time, dates, pandemic, lockdown.
I was actually really great watching Alana draw and do artwork online as well. I love that one. It was so just lovely to watch, actually, and listen to her speak about her process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So, and then do you think, I'm just looking at my time here, and we're getting up to the 30 minutes. So just,
okay.
Do you think there's anything that you're going to, you know, carry forward from the pandemic times to the whatever comes after times?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the thing that I was just writing about this before we had our talk, but it's strange, like the Birds and Books project, I made it a few years ago, and now because of this collaboration with like Leaf Rapids and Digital Originals, and then there's an online gallery through Manitoba Arts Network, I started actually revisiting making bird collages, but based around birds in Manitoba. So, I mean, I've been living the itinerant artist life for like 5 years, right? Going all over the place. And the pandemic has made me stay in one place. It's a place that I actually grew up in and I know well, but I'm actually making work about it for probably the first time in my life. So, I mean, that's, I never would have planned that, and I'm actually really happy about it. So that's not directly related to online, but it's directly related to being in one place and having to do that. So there's something, and also slowing down. I mean, the other project I'm working on with Ariosa, which is the vertical dance company in Ucluelet, like we're supposed to do that there, but I can't get there. So we've had to reimagine that project and collaborate remotely and do things we never would have done before. And it's really interesting. So, you know, that's what I'm taking away from this, is like slowing down and also just reorganizing my way of thinking about making artwork, I guess. Yeah.
And really connecting with Manitoba. Did you do your undergrad in Manitoba?
I started it here. I did 2 years at U of M, and then I became a rock climber and tree planter, and I went to Emily Carr. I became a mountain person pretty early on and really wanted to be in the mountains. So yeah. I started my degree here though in the mid 90s. Yeah.
And was that in art?
Yep. I went to School of Art for 2 years at the University of Manitoba. Yeah. Which is now where I teach sessionally.
Right.
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's nice because I mean, I haven't really thought about it, but you lived in Banff for so long, and then like you said, moving around with your masters and things like that. So actually staying put in Manitoba and connecting with the location, that's really cool. So I have one final question about an important part of your oeuvre. And of course, I'm very much into, and this is Al Vinoy and Louise Barrett, who I work with, which is the embodied approach to art. So I'm going to have to take my headset off, and I'm going to ask you to talk about this artwork.
Okay. Okay. Well, yes,
So, yes, what do you have to say about what I have on my head?
I have to say that that is a hat that I knit for you, based on an Icelandic lope, let lope pattern I found on the internet. So that is a volcano hat. So you have a volcano hat on your head, and I knit that for you as a gift.
And I believe
And I
it's
also knit
made.
this sweater. Yes.
And I believe it's made out of Icelandic wool. My hat.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have Icelandic ancestry, and my mom is a masterful Icelandic knitter, and I learned from her. And I've recently taken that up in the past few years. So you benefited from my learning of that skill.
I feel like I have to now like talk about hosers while I have this on my head. I should have had a stubby beer bottle ready.
Totally.
Plus,
Yeah,
we're doing this at 10 in the morning, and that might have been a little bit disturbing. But
maybe.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been a prop. Would have been a
It's 12 o'clock somewhere. Isn't that the line?
Yeah. Oh, 12 o'clock. That's the Manitoba time for drinking. Normally it's 5.
Oh, God. Maybe we have to cut that part anyway. Oh, shoot.
So anyway, thank you very much, Sarah. And this has been a really good conversation.
Yeah, thank you for your good questions and insights.
All right.